Welcome to the Point of View. Today I'm having Minister of State, Mr. EGEMEN Baş. Today we are going to talk about Turkish-European Union relations and the recent developments in Turkey's foreign policy. Mr. Baş, welcome to the Point of View.
It's good to be here.
Today I'm going to ask some questions that I believe on the minds of our foreigner audience. And the first question is, in 2002, the Justice and Development Party came to power, promising the voters that it would advocate Turkey's membership to the European Union. And in fact, during its first term in the office, various reforms were passed so as to make Turkey's democracy compatible with that of European Union. However, it has been reported by many observers that the JDP government gave up the EU process and no longer interested in the EU membership. Would you agree with these statements?
I sure would not. The Justice and Development government in Turkey is fully determined to continue on the EU path of our country. The EU path has taken a very normal, routine procedure. So it might not make the headline news all the time. You cannot get a date to start accession negotiations every other day. But the reform process, which is the main backbone of the Europeanization of our country, is going with full speed. I was appointed as the first sole Minister for EU Affairs and Chief Negotiator without having any other portfolio on January 9th of 2009. And since then, both myself and my whole team, a full ministry, is working on the reform procedure. Everything that we are doing, including the constitutional amendment referendum that took place on the 12th of September last year, was actually in line with keeping Turkey's promises to EU vis-à-vis our reforms. Turkey first applied to the European Economic Zone back in 1959. Those days, Turkey was a poor country with less hopes compared to today. Those days, we had a per capita income of $400. But right now, we have $11,000 per capita income, which happens to be higher than 6 member states already. But we had 8.9% growth in year 2010, whereas the European average was only 1.5%. Which means we did 6 times better than the European average. So if Turkey continues with the same stability, and if Turkey continues with the same economic growth, we will be doing much better than most of the EU member states by the time we complete our negotiations. For example, we have opened 13 chapters out of 33 so far. But if you look at the reforms that we have already conducted, if you look at the laws that have been accepted, approved by the Turkish Parliament, all the new regulations that have been announced, we have actually done our homework to open 16 more chapters. So as far as I'm concerned, Turkey has already done enough work to open 29 chapters, not 13. So how come those 29 chapters are not open? It's not because of Turkey, it's because of EU. European Union member states have somehow blocked 17 of the remaining 20 chapters. Okay. And we're now trying to open the chapter on competition. Now, for God's sake, the competition environment in Turkey is not any less compared to Malta or Bulgaria or Romania or Hungary. Turkey is doing very well. But the Commission has been making some demands which would hurt the Turkish economy. So we are taking our steps very carefully. Unfortunately, the EU has lost credibility in Turkey. A recent poll shows when 2,500 Turkish people were asked if they think EU has been sincere with Turkey or has it had double face. 8% said sincere, 92% said otherwise. And this shows that the fact that we are not getting enough cooperation in the fight against terrorism, the fact that the visa regime towards Turkish citizens by EU member states, the fact that our chapters are blocked, the Cyprus situation, all unfair approaches to Turkey have actually caused a very strong, deep-rooted problem vis-à-vis trusting Europe, European institutions, and most importantly, the Commission. When we need to overcome this difficulty, so we are internalizing our own reform process. Rather than talking about EU reforms, we're talking about enhanced democracy, we're talking about environment and livable cities, we're talking about strong economy, we're talking about leading country, we're talking about Turkey's development. All these are actually in line with EU acquis. So the things that we are promising in our election portfolio, in our election platform, are actually all in line with the EU standards that we're trying to reach.
Yes, Mr. Minister, Turkey may have done its homework, and the EU may have some double standards towards Turkey. But despite that, what has our government done to convince the Europeans that Turkey has done its homework and it's now EU's turn to do something in return?
Well, Turkey has been preaching this message on a daily basis to every European guest that visits Turkey at the level of states, or every time I go around, my foreign minister goes around, my prime minister goes around, my president goes around Europe, we all say the same thing. Just to cite an example, a month before the parliament went off for elections, before our recess, we passed the law on obligations and the law that governs trade, the commercial trade law. The number of articles in those two laws are actually 3,200. If our opposition had acted their usual self and opposed every single article, gave amendments for change to each and every article, it would have taken us 5 years just to pass those 3,200 articles. But because the NGO community, all the main business associations and umbrella organizations gathered and visited all the opposition parties and in a way convinced them to work and cooperate with the government, we could pass those 3,200 articles in 5 days. This clearly shows to the European audience that when there is will, there is way. Turkey is determined to continue on its reform path. But sometimes you need to be motivated. I've always argued that EU is Turkey's dietitian. We all know in order to lead a healthy life, both you and I need to watch what we eat, and we need to exercise regularly. But it's not easy doing it on our own. Only when a dietitian gives you a prescription to follow, 45 minutes of cardio activity every day, eating a slice of wheat bread, a little cheese, some tomatoes or cucumbers, whatever, you implement that prescription, you become healthy. Turkey is implementing the dietitian's prescription, which is the acquis. The fact that the dietitian is moody, the fact that the dietitian is overweight, the dietitian has a few clogged arteries, the fact that EU's economy is not really in great shape does not make the prescription bad. The reason European Union member states are going through a very difficult economic period right now is because 16 of the 27 member states are not in line with the Maastricht criteria. However, Turkey is, except for being in the EU zone, except for being in the Eurozone, Turkey has fully implemented the Maastricht criteria, and that's why we had 8.9% growth. That is why we are the fastest growing economy in Europe. Just to cite an example, the most successful economy in EU right now is the German economy, and they had around 3% growth. But Turkey had 9% growth, which shows we did 3 times better than Germany. But there's another difference between Turkey and Germany. The median age in Germany is 45, but the median age in Turkey is 28, which means this is not a short-term process, this is a long-term endeavor. Turkey will continue to grow, Turkey will continue to pass most of the member states, and we are a key to most of Europe's challenges. Europe cannot solve its economic problems, its energy issues, its diversity issues, its integration problems, its whole approach to international politics without Turkey's cooperation. Turkey, as the most eastern part of the West and most western part of the East is really the key to solve Europe's challenges and problems.
I see. So Turkey is on a diet with respect to European Union, and hopefully we are going to lose some weight and become more healthy.
Turkey will be more fit, more dynamic, more healthy, more prosperous, more democratic, more in line with international human rights standards, and EU is the most important external motivator of this process.
I see. To follow your example, another ingredient in our diet is this zero problem policy towards the Middle East. Has there been a shift of axis in Turkey's foreign policy as the AK party government is now placing more emphasis on Turkey's relations with Muslim countries in the Middle East rather than the West, particularly with Europe?
Not really. Turkey has always been observed, associated with, even called as a bridge. We have always been a bridge between East and West, Europe and Asia, energy resources and consumers, a bridge among trading partners, a bridge among peace partners. Well, in order for any bridge to be reliable, it needs to sit on four strong legs. What Turkey is doing right now is not shifting to the east or to the west. Turkey is still where she is, but Turkey is moving up. And Turkey is strengthening all four legs simultaneously. Turkey is strengthening the eastern leg and the western leg, southern leg and the northern leg at the same time, simultaneously. Sometimes we're asked if Turkey is choosing east towards the west, and I'm saying, well, Turks are very capable. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. The fact that we are exploiting, taking advantage of, going after opportunities in the countries towards east of Turkey or north of Turkey or south of Turkey does not necessarily mean we're giving up on our aspirations towards western parts of our country. The Turkish people as a nation have been marching towards the west for more than 1,000 years. We came all the way from Central Asia, we went all the way to Vienna, and now we're on our way to Brussels. But this time we're going with peace. We are going there to be a part of the grandest peace project of the history of mankind, which is European Union. And Turkey's potential vis-a-vis the countries in the Middle East, in the Caucasus, in the Balkans, in Central Asia, are actually advantages that Europe should enjoy. Turkey, once she becomes a member of EU, will help Europe become much more influential in other geographies. The EU is a peace project. It has put an end to all the wars on the continent. So it's right now a continental peace project. But we can turn that continental peace project into a global peace project. Turkey's aspirations to become a member of EU are closely watched by more than 3 billion people. People in China, people in India, people in Africa, people throughout the Islamic geography are looking at how Turkey is treated. And if Europe chooses to remain as a Christian club, they will be giving the very wrong message to the rest of the world.
Do you think Turkey may become a model of democracy in the Middle East or for other parts of the world?
I do not like to use the word model or example, but Turkey is definitely a source of inspiration because we have coexisted culture of Islam with culture of democracy for more than 200 years. And in those 200 years, we have made some great achievements, but we have also made some mistakes. We're not proud of the fact that we had military coups. We're not proud of the fact that we had executed our own prime minister along with 2 of his ministers. We're not proud of the fact that Turkey had unsolved murder cases. Turkey had torture. Turkey had very dark periods towards her own citizens, towards citizens of the majority and citizens of the minority groups. Different religious groups had their own share of being victimized in this country in the past. But right now, Turkey is enjoying the most prosperous and most importantly, the most transparent